In this video, I will be showing you how to test this cylinder style 1, which is a double-acting welded cylinder. Before you set up for this cylinder, you must look over the operation sheet and make sure you are at sequence 20. This sequence is for the oil test operation, and it will have all the information you need, like what materials are required such as plugs and cartridge valves, and what tools are required such as oil test pressure, magnet, dwell time, bypass tool, required torque, and dummy valve, as well as production notes and instructions that need to be performed and verified for this cylinder during oil test. You also need to do your first off after finishing the setup and completing your first tested good cylinder by having another operator do your first off check and signing it. Note that all cylinders you will oil test will not have the same work instructions, so it is your job to always carefully read everything on the operation sheet and make sure you follow them. And you need to look at the assembly drawing to help you see the correct orientation of the pinhole, size of the ports, and notes that needs to be completed and signed for the ones that are only applicable to the oil test operation. The calibration of the bypass tool using the verification gauge must be performed prior to the first order of cylinders that requires a bypass test on your shift. The camera must be correctly positioned and pointed at the rod end of the cylinder, and pull back the masking seal to be able to visualize the wiper seal closely when checking for bulging and seal leaks during oil test. Here are all the areas to look for on this cylinder where leaks can occur during oil test. This is the rod end of the cylinder, and where leaks can occur are at the wiper seal, tube seal, and port weld. This is the mid-section of the cylinder, and where leaks can occur are at the feeder tube weld connections, and they are at the rod end port, valve block, and then the tack here. And here. This is the base end of the cylinder, and where leaks can occur are at the feeder tube weld connections and at the base end casting weld. Another area to watch out for are the porosity leaks on the casting. When looking for leaks on the feeder tube weld connections to the ports and the valve block, it's important to look all around it, but you need to put more focus on the start and end area of the weldment, as this is where most of the leaks occur. Note that the cylinders you will oil test will be different from what you see in this video. There are some cylinders that have valve blocks that don't need feeder tube on one side, as because it is directly connected to the tube, as shown right here as an example. In this case, you will need to watch more closely of weldment around the valve block for leaks, especially at the corners, and to do the dwell time as indicated on the operation sheet. This part of the video will now show you how to test this cylinder. First, load the cylinder on the oil test bench and connect the dummy valves and swivel fittings. And properly clamp down the cylinder so it will not move during oil test. Then wipe the whole cylinder with a clean rag so it's easy to find where the oil leaks are at. Also, don't forget to pull back the masking seal. Now you can start the oil test with the first cycle, followed by the second cycle. Then on the third cycle, close the bypass tool and pressurize the rod end by holding on to the retracting button for 30 seconds dwell time. This is where you turn your focus on the rod end of the cylinder to check for leaks at the wiper and tube seals, port weld, and at the feeder tube weld connections to the port and valve block. Also, do not forget to check for bulging at the wiper seal. You also need to check the bypass gauge and visualize that the needle does not move. This means it passes the bypass test. If it moves during the dwell time, that means it failed the bypass test. After the 30 seconds dwell time have finished, open the bypass tool and pressurize the base end by holding on to the extend button for another 30 seconds dwell time. Here you turn your focus to the base end of the cylinder and check for feeder tube weld leaks, base end casting weld leaks, and porosity leaks on the casting. After the 30 seconds of dwell time have finished, you can now air retract the cylinder. This ends the third cycle. Do not remove the dummy valves and swivel fittings after the oil test has been completed. You first have to go around the cylinder to visually inspect up close the rod end, ports, feeder tubes, valve blocks, base end, and any other welded joints for leaks using the UV LED flashlight. The oil will glow a white color once the flashlight is pointed to it, making it easier to visually detect smaller oil leaks. You can now push the masking seal back to its original place. Ensure that the masking seal is seated correctly before sending the cylinder to the paint line. If there is oil leaks coming out of the swivel fittings during oil test, you must repair it and retest the cylinder. This will help eliminate any confusion when checking for oil leaks on the cylinder. Once confirmed that the cylinder has no oil leaks and all parts are assembled and welded, and it is functioning normally, you can stamp the cylinder and remove the dummy valves and swivel fittings. If there is any defects on the cylinder, you must write a hold tag and place it on the yellow cart to be reworked. Now install port plugs and cartridge valves on the cylinder. Note that cylinders with cartridge valves must be inspected and the number on them must match the number on the operation sheet, and all O-rings must be in good condition before they go into the valve block to ensure they are correct. Then torque the cartridge valves with the indicated value on the operation sheet. And apply inspection markings to confirm that all plugs, cartridge valves, and retaining ring have been installed properly. This cylinder has now completed and passed the oil test operation.